I write comedy because there is enough drama in the world and people want to laugh.
So let's bring in Hollywood divorce attorney David Glass for more on this. David.
People going through divorces are going through some of the hardest times of their lives, and a lot of what they're going through is emotional. And in any divorce, there's a huge sense of loss, and loss of relationship, of money, some friends.
Hi, I'm David Glass, host of the HourGLASS Podcast. We've had some really great guests on the show in season 6, and today is no exception. With us today is Cindy Chupack, a screenwriter, producer, author, and director who's written for hit shows including Sex and the City, Modern Family, and Everybody Loves Raymond. She's won 2 Emmys and 3 Golden Globes for her work. And if that wasn't enough, she's also written and directed a film you can watch on Netflix called Otherhood, starring Angela Bassett, Patricia Arquette, and Felicity Huffman. And she's written 2 comic memoirs and a children's book. Her first book, the Between Boyfriends book, was a New York Times bestseller that Cindy describes as taking you from breakup to your next boyfriend. In addition, she's had her own relationship column in both Glamour and O, the Oprah magazine. I can tell you, I found Cindy to be bright, funny, positive, and very wise. So let's get to it. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've always wondered, as a screenwriter, how much of your personal experience winds up being a blueprint for your scripts. I'm a lawyer. I don't have any creative writing abilities. My clients tell me the story and then I can turn it into something. Mm-hmm. How do you come up with this when you're writing screenplays?
Well, there's a lot of, the way I write and the shows I've written on, there's a lot of personal experience, or at least you're trying to find some kernel of truth that you can kind of hang on to and relate to and infuse your own personal experience into it, because it just seems so much better, funnier, more true, hopefully like rings true to people more. So for example, when I was at Everybody Loves Raymond, there was a summer where my dad, he was always a bad driver, but my sister and I kind of just grew up with it and knew like maybe we'll die in his car one day, we don't know. And then when she had kids, she finally was like, I think I have to tell him not to drive the kids. And then, so I came into the Everybody Loves Raymond room after that summer and said, I think this would be a good story to have Ray have to tell his dad, Frank, about that. And we talked about how that's so hard for older people because it's giving up the car keys is like giving up, you're old. So just trying to find some story that feels like it'd be fun for the characters of the show, but also would resonate with the audience.
Yeah. Do you have any other anecdotes like that? Stuff from your own personal life that you put into any of the shows that you've written for?
I mean, I have a million of them. In fact, I wrote this book, the Between Boyfriends book, all about dating. And one of the stories, someone said, you stole that from Sex and the City. And it was like, no, that was the real story. Yeah. So I guess the very first Sex and the City I wrote was based on, I had bought a house by myself, this house that I'm in. Mm-hmm. And everyone said, as soon as you buy a place, someone will propose. And then I had this couple house sitting here and they got engaged while they were here. Right. So I was like, I thought it would be to me. They sort of like took my good mojo from the house. Yeah. And then they asked me to write a poem to read at their wedding. And I ended up crying while I was reading because my boyfriend at the time, like the biggest thing that had happened is he'd given me like the pink toothbrush head to his electric toothbrush. And then I had to play it off like, like I was overcome with emotion for their wedding. So if you go back and you look at Sex and the City, the chicken dance, we sort of took that storyline for Miranda, who had just bought an apartment, and for Carrie, she had to do a poem there. And we even had the toothbrush head. So there were just a lot of stories like that became fodder for especially Sex and the City, but also almost all the shows I've written on. I feel like there's been some through line that feels real.
That's amazing to hear that. And then, I especially like the piece where someone tells you stole it from Sex and the City.
I know.
You wrote it. Out of all the different shows that you've written for or produced, do you have a favorite, or are there any that are up towards the top, or are they all your children because you've worked on them so closely?
I have to say, even though it's so long ago, Sex and the City was my favorite, just because I had written on shows that weren't I mean, I was the same age as those characters were supposed to be when I was writing it. Like when I started,
Yeah.
I think I was 34. And it was so much what I was talking to my friends about, but not necessarily what I had been able to put in any show I'd written on so far. It was the first single camera, like cable show. So it was kind of fancier than the 4-camera in front of an
Right.
audience shows I'd done. And it was just a really fun way to write, actually, because you didn't have to worry about act breaks, and we didn't have advertisers, which meant you could use language and even just be freer to be honest about, like we did an episode about abortion, and we could just think, what would be true for them, as opposed to what will sponsors be okay with us saying, kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge shift probably for all writers. And was that one of the first, I'm not big on my TV history, but was that one of the first cable shows that was originally written?
It was HBO was pretty new at the time, and we were out right when The Sopranos was out, and they just had Curb Your Enthusiasm coming out. We filmed on
Okay,
a
yeah.
stage right across from The Sopranos, so we would have salads for lunch, and they would have like meatball subs. So it was still
Wow.
pretty early, but it was early in HBO days.
Yeah, that must have been a very exciting time then to be associated with any of those productions.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was interesting because it felt like a big gamble at first. You know, nobody had really heard of them. Not everyone subscribed. People didn't think pay cable or streaming as it is now would, catch on. And so I went from like a big hit, which I finally got to, which was Everybody Loves Raymond, to this show that my accountant father was like, "What are you doing?" But I just felt like I would have more to say and more to write. And it was a big pay cut, but then it just really changed my trajectory, I think, taking that job.
Yeah. Now, what can you explain to our viewers and to me, working in a writer's room, and you've written books, and so you've obviously written on your own. Is it a completely different dynamic working with a bunch of writers?
Yes, in a good way and a bad way. Like when I write on my own, my books that are mostly first-person comic memoirs, I can just sit down and do it, and I'm the authority, and I don't have to wait for a go-ahead or a green light or casting or anything. So there's something nice about that. But then on a show, there's something great about the way the collective group comes up with stories, and you get their response to a story first if you have an idea, and then everybody brings in their best ideas, and then when you go off and write the outline or the script, you kind of have the blessing of the whole staff and everybody behind you, so you don't feel like you're vulnerable so much.
And I guess Saturday Night Live is like the ultimate writer's room, but all the way compressed into a 3/4 of a week, from what I've read about it.
Yeah, I think that's that's like it's like boot camp. I mean, even episodic television is a little like boot camp, because you have to get the episode done. You have to get it in post, and you have to get it on the air. So you just learn to, it's not like a factory thing, but you just learn that you can hear when it's good enough and you can let it go, and you keep reworking and reworking forever, like you might a screenplay on your own time or something. So yeah, Saturday Night Live on that kind of schedule would be the ultimate boot camp.
Yeah, wow. I can't even imagine.